So everybody, thank you again for being here for our planetary workshop, Future of Intelligence, Part 2, AI and Economic Disruption. So we're going to start with just a quick welcome and see where everybody's at on this globe, on this beautiful planet we live on. And then we will follow with some chanting, which is going to be live today. We're very excited, and guided meditation. We'll use the Baba Kevalam. Then we'll have a fantastic presentation followed by Q&A, closing, and some announcements. And if you want to, before I get too far ahead, we are going to be using a little bit of Menti this morning. So if you want to, please log in. The link should be in the chat, and it'd be great to have as many of you possible to interact. And then also, we'd love for you to turn on your cameras. And if you need translation, so far we do have in Vietnamese with Sabode, and I believe we'll have it in Spanish soon. He's just trying to log in. So, all right. So here at PLT, we are very much an inclusive community, and we want to welcome everybody from all parts of the world and all parts of, whatever path they're on. And so we want to make sure that we make sure everybody feel very welcome. So we're just going to think this with this quote this morning. It is our duty to accelerate the speed of human progress. Your endless efforts to broaden and smoothen the path of human movement will render our present existence and your future history inestimable. Shri Shri Anandamurti. So again, we do welcome everyone here. Hopefully you will enjoy today's workshop. I know I'm very excited and looking forward to it. And let's get on to the next slide. So we'd love you to take a minute to log into Menti, warm up your fingers, warm up your minds a little bit, and tell us in the world where you are. So we've got already some people logging in for the USA and Brazil. I know we have peoples from Vietnam. Got a couple people, it looks like, across the United States. And if you can't log into Menti, you can always put it into the chat where you're at in the world. Nothing wrong with that. I see a few namaskars. Namaskar, welcome everyone. Great. Thank you, Pratik.
Thank you for including New Zealand in the map. It gets left off a lot of maps.
Hawaii
very
got left
upset
off.
about it.
Yeah, I'm floating out here in the ocean somewhere in the white. All right, great. We have somebody from India. That's great. It's wonderful. Always beautiful to see brothers and sisters from all over the globe. So thank you. All right. So also just want to let you guys know that most of you are aware of this, that we do have an online PLT global community. And it's we're really excited about it. I think it's growing. I think we have almost 180 members now, a part of the community. And we have it's a great place to get to know each other better, a great place to increase our knowledge and share as we grow as a community and as we're trying to bring positive change to the world. And we have daily interaction. We have yoga classes and other classes on demand. We also have live events like today's workshop, planetary meditation, and it's ever growing. And so please check it out. Now, just take some time and just kind of, look around and see what you can discover and introduce yourself. We love to know more about you. You can fill out your profile, those kind of things. It's kind of a PLT's own private, like Facebook, without all the ads. So anyway, we love to see more of you guys there. And so to start this workshop, like I said, we are going to have some Kiirtan, some live Kiirtan with Dada Nabhaniilananda, and we'll be using Baba Nam Kevalam, followed by some guided meditation. And then we're here ready for the exciting workshop. So thank you again for being here and enjoy. Dada, are you ready?
Okay, now I'm ready. Okay, we're going to sing this mantra, Bhavanam Kevalam. You can join in, but with your microphone off, please, because latency makes sharing music on the internet difficult. So this mantra means only the feeling of limitless love. So just close your eyes. Bhavanam Kevalam. 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 Now keep your eyes closed and sit straight with your hands cupped in your lap. And breathe through your nose if you can comfortably. Let the mantra Bhavanam Kevalam continue in your mind as though you're hearing it, you're listening to it. And it's reminding you that there is only this feeling of limitless love coming from deep within you and filling all of your mind.
Hello, is anybody talking?
Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam. Just take a deep breath. You can stretch a little if you like. And open your eyes. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And this morning, I'm going to be presenting some ideas about the future of intelligence. This is part 2 of a 4-part series. And I have a little explanation about how this has changed. This particular presentation has changed because I interviewed Sohail Inayatullah. He was supposed to be my live guest today, but we realized a few days ago that right now it's 1 o'clock in the morning for him because he's in Australia. So we recorded his interview on Friday, and I'm going to include some excerpts. And it was remarkable. I was editing it until 1 a.m, so I didn't expect to have to do that. So it's a little bit different but actually it's cool because we get the highlights, and also I get to correct some of the problems with the video, so you don't have to endure those. And so we won't be able to ask live questions, but what he offered to do is answer your questions later. So at the end, we're going to invite you to post written questions, which he will answer in writing from Australia over the next couple of days on the PLT platform. So, because he anyway wanted to have an ongoing discussion of some of these really important, complex kind of issues. So this has kind of 3 little bits to it. Firstly, I'm going to give you, I'm going to show a little presentation of this idea of the future of intelligence and how how artificial intelligence and automation particularly are impacting the world economy and the nature of work itself. So that's a little intro, and then we'll have Sohail's observations and comments on how he deals with advising organizations and governments on the future, how to prepare for the future. That's his job, and he's kind of important, I think. A lot of people seem to think. And so he's got some amazing insights. And then we'll have scope for some questions, and then later on we'll go into breakout rooms where we'll be able to discuss in small groups. Okay. So I'm going to jump straight into my little presentation. The first part, this is fairly short. So I will share my screen. If you give me a moment. There we go. All right. So this is, there you go. So yeah, this is part 2. Just in case you didn't catch part 1, what we focused on there was understanding a bit more about artificial intelligence and human intelligence, particularly, and how we human beings might respond to the fact that we can't get away from that artificial intelligence and technology and automation are playing an increasingly big role in our lives and in the world. And I interviewed a good friend of mine who's an expert in artificial intelligence. So you can read this, my summary of that. I wrote a little bit slightly humorous summary of that. It's posted in the PLT discussion group, and also on like 3 other places. So one of the main conclusions of that is related to what's happening to economies and work. So you've probably heard of this idea, and one of the most common questions in Google searches today is about this. And the question that comes up again and again in Google searches is, are robots going to take my job? A lot of people are worried about this, particularly people who use Google, apparently. So, yeah, it's one of the most commonly searched phrases. There is very interesting little short documentary series. I think it's on Netflix, I think, and it's starring Robert Downey Jr., aka Iron Man. So he's got this amazing presenter. And it's kind of fun, but it's about this issue of artificial intelligence. If you want to understand a bit more about it, they explain it very well, if you happen to be on Netflix. So this is a really trending topic. A lot of people are concerned about it because it's more and more people are realizing that this is happening. This is, I was reading recently that Foxconn, which is one of the biggest employers in China, they make iPhones. They have 2 million people work there manufacturing iPhones. They just bought 60,000 robots. that's going to put a lot of people out of work. So it's not just Europe and America or wherever that this is happening. This is coming in different parts of the world. It's not limited to the most technologically developed countries. Though, of course, China is becoming a very technologically developed country very fast. So anticipated job losses, there are lots of different numbers on this. These are projections. So there's no guarantee that these are accurate, but this is one guesstimate, I would call it. It's a guess and an estimate from recent times about job losses over the next 20 years. They were thinking in England, 34% due to automation and artificial intelligence, machines taking our jobs. The US, 46%, China, 70%. Because China is the biggest manufacturer in the world, and this is particularly hitting manufacturing, but it's been hitting manufacturing for 10, 20 years already. Now it's affecting a whole lot of other job categories. Legal, accounting, even it's disrupting education. And Sahaya will talk about this in more detail when we get to him. But the big thing that is kind of new is that it is increasing, technology increases not just wealth and job losses, but wealth disparity. So it brings more and more money into the hands of fewer and fewer people, which means there are more poor people. There's less money distributed to ordinary people. So just to give you an idea of how dramatically the wealth is being concentrated in a few hands. These are the two wealthiest people in the world. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, and they're not the two richest people in the world. He's the richest man in the world. Mark Zuckerberg's somewhere down there. He's only worth 135 billion, the poor man. So, but the big jump was from 2009 to 2021. Okay, so that's 12 years. And in that 12 years, Bezos' wealth went from $6.8 billion to $200 billion. And Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, went from $2 billion to $135 billion in 9 years. And in that same period in the US, the minimum wage of $7.25 stayed the same. It didn't even increase to adjust to inflation. So this is creating a giant problem. And I'm going to show you a little video about that, which is kind of sums that up. So here we go.
People are talking a lot about inequality these days, about the fact that the richest 1% have so much more than everybody else. But most of the focus seems to be on the United States. And it strikes me that the same story needs to be told about global inequality too. So I did some research, and this is what I found from reliable sources like the UN. It turns out that while the US is totally out of whack, things are actually way worse for the planet as a whole. Let's start with this graph. A perfectly even distribution of wealth among all living people, with everyone divided into 5 equal groups. Now, let's show how much each group actually has. Shocking, right? 80% of the world's people barely have any wealth. It's hard to even see them on the chart. Meanwhile, the richest 2%, they have more wealth than half of the rest of the world. Let's look at this chart another way. Let's take the whole world's population, all 7 billion of us, and reduce it to just a representative 100 individuals. Here they are. Poorest people on the left, richest people on the right. Now let's show how the world's total wealth, roughly $223 trillion, is distributed. The vast majority have practically nothing. Nothing with which to educate their children, nothing with which to pay for basic medicines. While the richest 1%, they've accumulated 43% of our world's wealth. The bottom 80%, meanwhile, that's 8 out of every 10 people, have just 6% between them. But even this doesn't really show how extreme things have become. The richest 300 people on Earth have the same wealth as the poorest 3 billion. So the number of people it takes to fill a mid-sized commercial aircraft have more wealth than the populations of India, China, the US, and Brazil combined. We can also see this difference geographically, with a huge and growing gap between a few rich places versus the majority of the world. For most of history, things were much more equal. 200 years ago, rich countries were only 3 times richer than poor countries. By the end of colonialism in the 1960s, they were 35 times richer. Today, they're about 80 times richer.
So we're starting off with the bad news. We won't end like this, don't worry. But that's the reality. And that's why so many people are still struggling, even though we are, as a species, generating tremendous wealth. And what's accelerating this shift of wealth now is computer performance, is technology. As machines become more intelligent, we become the means of production. Means who owns the robots, who is controlling these intelligent machines, they get the money. And the rest of the people lose their jobs. A lot of them do. So it's an unsustainable situation. So the world's not getting poorer. It's getting much richer. But technology creates more wealth, means less work. And under capitalism, in that situation, that means more wealth disparity, which is unsustainable. Now I'm going to introduce my guest in a minute, Sahel Inayatullah. He got his PhD in Hawaii. He's originally from Pakistan, now lives in Australia, is very much a global citizen. He literally works all over the world for different organizations and governments. He's a political scientist and a futurist. He's the UNESCO chair in future studies. That's his specialty, is studying the future. His PhD was actually on the work related to the future of PR Sarkar, Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, who is the founder of Anandamaga and the author or the founder of the Prout philosophy, or the creator of that, which we'll be looking at a little later. He's professor at Tam Kang University in Taiwan, associate professor in Melbourne Business School and in the University of Melbourne. During 21, he's the virtual futurist in residence. I didn't even know there was such a thing with the government of Abu Dhabi, culture and tourism. He's also worked this in the last year with, I didn't even put the slide up. It's like 20 different organizations, 5 different governments, including the government of New Zealand, which I was kind of proud to hear, or happy to hear, since I'm from there. And he'll tell us a little bit about that work. So what we're going to do is jump out of the slides, if they will obey me. What's happening here? I want to go back. That's better. And I'm going to show you the video directly so that I can pause it. It means I need to stop sharing and reshare. And this time I need to enable the better sound. Sorry about that. So this is my edit. It's a kind of rough edit, very rough, of my conversation with Sahel and Freddie. And we touch on a number of different things. I haven't included my questions because the sound wasn't that good, but also I'd rather you hear directly from him. But I'm going to interrupt the video occasionally to explain, because one problem with talking to someone like Sahel is he's certainly one of the 3 or 4 smartest people I've ever met. And he talks to other smart people most of the time, which means he doesn't always make it that simple. So I had to run to catch up. And I already am familiar with the material. So I'm going to pause sometimes and maybe explain a little bit about what he's talking about. So I started off by asking him about if these projections that we're seeing, like, massive unemployment in different parts of the world, if they are accurate, and if the impact of artificial intelligence and robots really is going to be that great. And here was his response.
Looking for the kind of seeds of change. So for me, doing this now in 2021, the seeds of change I'm looking at is, for one, in which ways can we change the paradigm of how we see technology in nature? The modern perspective was we push nature away, adopt technology, and push humans away. And so then the system in itself continues accumulating capital. That type of the model we're seeing with Amazon, etc. So for me, the opposite is where we need to move towards. That's humans in coevolution with nature and technology and cities. So this is a coevolution where robots become part of our families. They become part of who we are. Nature becomes part of who we are. So this is co-designing, co-partnering for dramatically new next 10, 50, 100 years.
So he's very big picture kind of person. But actually, I remember before this, he explained to me that when he was doing his PhD in Hawaii, he was asked to help the Justice Department of Hawaii, the State Department, to create a projection of how artificial intelligence would affect their work. That's in 1982. So his point is that we've been anticipating this shift from human to machine intelligence for a long time and trying to guess what will happen. And what they concluded was that most of the work that lawyers and legal professionals are doing now will be taken over by artificial intelligence at some point. Back then, they had no idea when. Now it's already happening. Because a lot of law is based on legal precedents. Means if you see these law offices, they have big rows of books, and those are full of precedents of legal cases from the past, which create a framework for them to judge the new cases. And lawyers have to remember crazy amounts of information. Machines are very good at that, and they're very good at researching and retrieving information. So that kind of work is already being taken over. It's going away. So the legal professionals will be left with actually the most important work, which is public education, ethics, and philosophy, and how to bring that into, how to apply those to the law. So that was one big shift that they anticipated back in 1982. It was very accurate. And that was his point, was that this shift is not new. This has been developing for a long time, and it's now becoming visible. So a lot of his work is anticipating these kind of trends. That's why his advice and guidance is considered so valuable, because he's made his whole life about anticipating trends.
This very much develops from the works of P.R. Sarkar, which was bring mind into technology, create a world where you're only working a few hours a day. So this is the wise, ethical use of technology. So that's kind of, and we see some of those changes. Every university we work with, they go, yes, robotics, yes, AI, but how do we bring the soul in? How do we keep our soul? How do we keep our humanity? And that becomes almost the guiding research question. Now, traditional models where, well, evolution is random, it's by chance, this is very clear. Evolution will be directed by humans, created by humans, and our model is partnership. And Sarkar talks about that. As we move from the physical, then to the intellectual, finally we'll be moving towards the spiritual. So this phase is disruptive because the physical is being challenged in every possible way, from climate change in a negative way, from automation in possibly a positive way, but we're seeing this dramatic discontinuity. So there's some choices here. So I've been doing work with about 4 or 5 national governments. And this is the question: ministries of employment, educational systems are all saying, we don't know what to do. And so they call in people like us who have this broader knowledge, not specific expertise, but can help them frame it. So the number of national ministries of education, this is, so what do we do? So I said, well, think of this in terms of scenarios. So scenario 1 is no change. Your Ministry of Education, your high schools, universities, you teach and train for yesterday's jobs. Because they're built into that, right? The educational model is built like a factory to produce widgets. People work 9 to 5. There's controllers. It's surveillance controller capitalism. So that's kind of what you're built in for. If you do nothing, you will stay in no change. And the conclusion will be you're creating young people entering a market that doesn't exist. Meaning they will overthrow you, or you'll go into deep despair. You go, as we say, you'll be Kodak. Right? That's option 1. Then it's what we don't want.
Okay, I just want to pause here just to make sure you understand. When he says you'll be Kodak, you might remember the Kodak company that pioneered film. When I was much younger, we used to take photographs with cameras that had physical film in there, and those films were developed. That technology was developed by Kodak. It was a giant company, but they didn't take the opportunity to shift into digital photography. They had the opportunity. They actually created some digital cameras, I think, but they didn't develop that. They stuck with the analog film, and now they don't exist. So it's become a meme. You get Kodak. It means you're no longer relevant because you don't recognize the trends, and you miss the opportunity. And what was very large can just disappear because technology overtakes it.
What's option 2? Well, option 2 is marginal change. Marginal change understands that even when you have vision guiding you, the structures of tradition are so strong, there's only very little you can do. As most ministers, political leaders I work with, when we're saying, let's create this different society, they said, we love the 2030 vision, but as the former president of the European Parliament said, we know what the right thing to do is when it came to climate change. We know the right thing to do. None of us believe we can get reelected on doing it. So this becomes a tension.
Okay, now I've got a question for you, and I want you to answer this in the chat if you have an idea. Oh, okay, thanks. I just got confirmation from Karun. Yes, Kodak did create some of the earliest digital cameras. Can you imagine what an opportunity that was that they didn't take? They were perfectly positioned to become the leading digital camera producer in the world, but they didn't. Now, this point he made just here is critical. So he just said he's talking to the president of the European Union, important person, should have a lot of power, but and he said they know what to do, but they can't do it because they don't know how to do that and get reelected, which comes to, why can't they get reelected? Why would making these decisions that are actually the best decisions for the future spoil their chances of being reelected? I would love to hear your thoughts on that in the chat. This, of course, is not unique to the European Union. This is also a problem in the United States, where I live, and many other places. A couple of issues here. Okay, we're getting some comments. Let me see. I would like to hear these. Okay. Okay. Cause is connected to fear. Possibly. Yeah, people don't want to hear bad news, the inconvenient truth. That's people sort of would rather not hear about it. So if you're the one that's telling them about it, you lose popularity. Elections are paid for by lobbyists. That's the case in the United States. That's critical. It means the people who actually control who gets elected here are not the people of the country. They are the rich people who pay the lobbyists and effectively bribe the politicians and finance the elections. Changes outside the comfort zone. That's very true. Again, people would rather they don't want to hear bad news, even if it's important to them. We prefer to think short-term. Uneducated populations. That's very true. Some of those decisions would have short-term impact. Exactly. This is very critical. Short-term impacts which are uncomfortable. Yeah, humans are not usually good at enduring short-term pain for long-term gain. Precisely. Power and position is addictive. That is a problem, but it's not this problem. Here, the problem is who has the power. In the United States, the people who control the elections are effectively the wealthy companies and individuals who finance elections. In Europe, I think that legal bribery, in political bribery, is not as legal as it is in the US. And the problem there is that the capitalists control the media, and the media control the elections. So the politicians know very well that if they make decisions that conflict with the interests of the very wealthy, they're going to lose the election. Almost certainly. Happens again and again. So it comes back to who has the real power. And the real power here is in the ownership of the media or the control of the election through other means. And it's not the population, really. I don't care about effects. People brush the problem under the carpet. Yes. And so what a lot of politicians do is make a minor reform and sort of kick the can down the road, as they say. It's the next administration's problem, which is what he's talking about here. And of course, that the problem just gets worse.
So then the marginal change is, okay, what we do is we put in Asia, we teach English. In the Western world, we teach Mandarin. So we teach a few new languages, and every school child, year 1 to 12, learns coding. So marginal change, we're still in the factory, the traditional capitalist system, where we're teaching a few new skills, language skills and coding skills, thus the rise of STEM.
Right.
And so then they do little edges around STEM, or STEM with some more females, STEM with some loving of nature more. But it's still within the marginal framework that we accept that traditions will continue. So then I say, okay, great. So what happens then? They said, well, actually, we're basically rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. And most ministries get that pretty quick. And yet the challenge is, well, how do I get all my high school principals to change? How do I get my vice chancellors to change? What incentives do I do? So then we go towards adaptive change. Adaptive change is, I think, what you're talking about. So given the disruptions of AI, 3D printing, the end of fossil fuels, peer-to-peer economies, how do we ensure our kids have a bright future? So this is teaching and training for tomorrow's jobs. So this is where we're looking for the weak signals. Is the future 3D printing? Is the future critical thinking? Is the future really emotional intelligence? If robots are doing the Shudra worker, humans are doing the emotional part. Is the future spiritual intelligence? And to every one of those, the answer is yes. Yes, it's ability to connect with others. It's ability to partner. It's ability to go towards spiritual intelligence. It's ability to do critical thinking. And we know from the empirical research, those skills will be much higher in demand. If robots can do the basic, what do humans do? Well, humans connect, humans partner, humans have emotional intelligence. So then how do I re-gear my entire system for that? So with one ministry in one country, they said, okay, this is cool. Let's start to make the change. So their scenario one was basically the university, the traditional bricks and mortar. Scenario two, they said the jukebox, the American system, where students make a whole range of choices. You choose this course, the electives model. But scenario three was more interesting. They call it the Uberification of universities. So you design your national educational system so any student can take a course anywhere in the world. If you want a meditation course from you in California, they sign up. If you want a Proud course from Portugal, they sign up. If you want AI from Beijing, they sign up. If you want nanotech, you go to Shanghai. So you as a student anywhere in the world, you're in the Uberification, and the course professor as AI, as a hologram, comes to you. So that's their 2030 vision. Then I said, okay, that's cool, but what's the 2040 one? What's next? They said, well, what's next is obvious. You create a global system of micro-certification. If robotics have disrupted so much, so basically there's 1,000 little degrees you get. So this month or this year, you decide what I really want to do is learn permaculture. But given that we all do credential each other, and given that there's so much rubbish out there, so there's a permacultural network that actually credentials you once you do some research, action learning. So university says, so we become the compliance system. The ministry says we're the compliance system of micro-credentialing. And we do that from the year of 5 to 90 or 100. So this is a dramatically different way of thinking about what should education do as we get, I think it's inevitable. It'll be destructive, the creative destruction Schumpeter talked about. Systems are destroyed by new technologies. Some of us make the jump and we grow the new space. Some of us defend and try to protect the old space. So our goal is, given these disruptions, how do we prepare people mentally in narrative so they choose the wiser solutions? I think.
Let me just show you a little summary of that. So just to make sure you keep some of it in your mind. So, wait on. Because I found that it helped to try and sum up some of his ideas. So here we have educating for the future. So you remember he's talked about no change. And I thought this was a great concept, educating for a market that doesn't exist. So that's, you know, if you stick with what the current education system in many places, that's what they're doing. Marginal change, you're sort of, you know, kicking the can down the road, as they say. They're just sort of delaying the problem. Adaptive change, talked about the Uberification of universities, but this radical change is really the future, global system of micro qualifications, the globalization of knowledge, taking it to the next level. Then the role of the universities, their new role becomes credentialing and compliance, making sure that what's being delivered is actually delivered by people who know what they're talking about, and it's really valuable, and not just random bits of knowledge from the internet, which is doesn't really help. So I think we can. Oh, right, we're going into this his theory of hands, different types of hands. We're going to go back to that in a second. Only way I know how to do this is stop sharing and then start sharing again. It just takes a second. Here we go.
And so this leads to part three. Part three, okay, one, here's how it impacts the educational system. Two, how does it impact the economy? So scenario one is it just finished a piece on the future of the world capitalist system, given the rise of AI and 3D printing and peer-to-peer. So scenario one, the metaphor was invisible hands, right? They come in, it accentuates capital, we get the billionaires versus the people at the bottom. And so this is the great divide, the great polarity, the great transition. And then if that continues, then there's some options. One is you give them breads and circus. You give them more science fiction movies and you give them a UBI. So everyone's happy, right? So this is the Roman Empire example. Invisible hands will do it. Give them UBI, give them holograms, everything's okay. We can accumulate our trillions, and those of us, as we pollute, we just go to Mars. Problem solved. Now, if we're all watching Foundation, if you read Foundation series, the outer planets, meaning the peripheries, the people on the outside, well, they come in and they destroy the system.
Okay, I need to explain the context. So there was a book called Foundation, and a series of books written by Arthur Asimov back in the 1960s, I think, or even earlier, which became very popular in the 60s and 70s. And it was science fiction. He was one of the most famous science fiction writers in history. And he was imagining a future civilization, a galactic civilization with thousands of planets as part of this huge empire. But of course, it was a metaphor, you could say, for civilization in general. And the whole point was prediction, or his projection of what would happen to civilization. And it's actually a fascinating study of whether human societies and civilizations, whether we can anticipate how they change and evolve and collapse and are reborn. And so actually it was part of the study of some of the people doing future studies. So now it's just been launched as a a new show on Apple TV. So that's what he's talking about. And I'm a science fiction nerd, so I know about it.
That's the weakness in visible hands. And East Asia is far more clever. They changed the story to visible hands, meaning market with state come in and they create the East Asian model of wealth. So market and state work together, use technology, and you choose the winners. In markets, you let the winners figure it out. You choose the winners. The Ministry of Economy says, okay, here's the 5 areas we're going to invest in. In South Korea 20 years ago, they had this discussion and they chose culture industries.
Oh, interesting.
And they said, and they had this conversation on the gross national cool, from GDP to the coolest industries. And the result 10 years later was, if you think about cultural industries in Asia, you get South Korea. Everyone watches K-pop. Everyone listens 10 years ago to Gangnam Style, etc. So it looked like it was invisible hands. It wasn't. It was visible hands, bureaucrats using innovators to think, where's the next jump? And so then you make your bet. So that's scenario 2. Visible hands, organizations, communities said, okay, here's how the world is changing. Tech's going to disrupt. It's going to lead to massive loss of jobs in labor and also in the clearly in accounting. Clearly, anything that can be automated will be automated, because that's the logic of the system. So then we think, well, what do we do next? And this is where you go to PR Sarkar. So Prout talks about shared hands, joined hands. So this is market. We have markets in Prout, very clear, small business enterprises. We have cooperatives, but they're shared hands. So it's market with community, with state. And so it says we're going to bring in AI, but we have cooperatives, scientific cooperatives, as we have on what scientists do with COVID-19, to challenge Pfizer to say, actually, why don't our scientists create public global health systems where we do the innovation? So this moves to the shared hand model. And so here wealth moves quicker because we don't have trillionaires, we're all millionaires, as we see in Norway, as we're seeing in New Zealand, as we're seeing in other countries that have good governance. So the money spreads everywhere and keeps on spreading. So shared hands is actually one of the big solutions. So as technology disrupts, the person who's disrupted, we're not throwing them out, we bring them in through retraining. So we retrain them, they join the shared hands community, and we find something they can do. Otherwise, they'll be the ones killing the vegans or killing the scientists or killing the tech people or joining extreme right wing, whether Bolsonaro in Brazil, the Trump in US, or Modi in India, or Taliban in Afghanistan. So this is where shared hands is important, so everyone feels they're part of it. So this is not just UBI, but universal basic assets. So they're getting assets, income, but again, the proud thing is you don't just want to give people stuff. They need to focus in terms of their contribution to society. Otherwise, Sarkar is very clear, we're just going to just hang out. So you...
Okay, so I'm going to jump out of that and give you a chance to ask some questions in a minute. So I just want to summarize a little bit more of what he's talking about and some of his other frameworks. So here he talked about invisible hands. So this is the he made fun of the billionaires who want to go to Mars because the Earth's been destroyed and they don't want to. They're not so the money's not being used to solve that problem, and so they escape to Mars, and everybody else has to deal with it. Then invisible hands. So that was the East Asian model, where the government plays a much more active role. And they decide which billionaires are going to be successful. That kind of happens in China, and to some degree even in Korea. They decided which industries we're going to invest in. Culture led to this global phenomenon of K-pop. That wasn't just because K-pop is cool. I don't actually like K-pop, but they didn't get me. But it's loved all over the world. What happened? Oh, okay. So I just had a little technical problem. Okay. And then joined hands. This is very, very critical concept in Prout of all stakeholders having a say. So the state, the cooperatives, people that would be handling large enterprises and small businesses and the market, as he says. And then magic hands is something else that he goes on to talk about, which is very futuristic, but it's not unrealistic. I'm not going to go into that now because it's too much of a new concept. But he summarized the Prout theory very beautifully, I think, in four P's, he calls it. So it's focused on prosperity, which means for everybody, not just for a few people, human beings and human welfare and well-being. And part of his work with the New Zealand government reflected that, where they were saying, well, okay, we're using the gross national product as kind of a measure of progress, but he talks about the bottom line. They call it the bottom line is how much profit are you making, but that needs to change. So he pursued that idea and says, well, really what we need is a quadruple bottom line. So the quadruple bottom line is these four different factors. So prosperity, people, the planet, this is our environment, it needs us, we need it, we need to work together, and purpose. And this was a way of encapsulating the idea of humans having a destiny beyond just surviving and having a comfortable life. We are driven by higher purpose, you could say, and it might drive us towards, what do we do when we have spare time and free time? Because most of the work's being done by machines, the wealth being shared in a reasonable way. So the survival issue is solved. We don't need to do very much work to survive. But what do we do with our time? That's actually the theme of next month's workshop. It's on how do we fulfill our purpose when we don't have to work hard to survive? And that's, we'll be looking at areas, obviously, things like spirituality, but also, we're interested in knowledge, in exploration, in aesthetics and creativity and other people and community and doing things with nature and people and all of that. So we are more than just simple animals. We have a complex and higher purpose. So Prout, the whole underlying goal of Prout, if you like, is to use these, how are we advancing in all of these areas? That's the measure of progress, not just money. And the last big framework, which we don't have time for, but I'm going to make the video available to everyone afterwards. You can watch it in your own time. We'll put it on the PLT platform. He was talking about a physicist, a brilliant physicist he knows, who talks about trends in terms of efficiency. So, in her view is through the lens of evolution. Evolution favors the efficient. We kind of know that from our study of nature. So if we apply that to these mega trends, nationalism is, at this stage, with the technology we have, nationalism is inefficient, also dangerous. Fossil fuels are inefficient, also dangerous. Efficient is global governance, and he touched on that when he mentioned this idea of why don't we have a global association of scientists who come up with, vaccines for a pandemic rather than private corporations who have their own interest. We pool our resources globally. It's a global problem. We address it globally. Renewable energy is efficient, and that is the future. And that's energy is a very, very big issue because it causes, if we use fossil fuels or non-renewable energy sources, energy becomes a source of conflict because there's a shortage. If we shift to renewable energy, there is abundance of energy, especially now that we have the technology for it. So it's no longer a source of conflict, and we don't have as many wars. The same applies to nationalism versus global governance. At this stage in the development of civilization, nationalism leads to wars. It's used as a sentiment by despots to whip up sentiment in order to cause wars, to distract from the shortcomings of the government themselves. So evolution favors the efficient, and efficiency wins out in the long run, one way or another. So these old strategies of nationalism, depending on fossil fuels, they are paths to extinction, literally. Because I asked him this question, I said, is our planet going to succeed? Is this going to be a successful planet? Are we going to be able to survive and go to the next level of evolution as a culture and society and civilization? He said, well, if we adopt the right path, yeah, we will. But if we don't, we are running the worst kind of risk. So that was the kind of last main concept that he talked about. And this was a quote from one of his old articles. To change the future, we must be able to imagine a different future. So I'm going to jump out of sharing now and ask you if you have any questions, and see what you think about that. Yeah, any questions about any of those ideas? And pretty shortly we'll go to our breakout rooms where we'll be able to discuss these in small groups as well. Maybe we have some comments here. So a nice comment from Karun, thanks. Yeah, we don't plan for the seventh generation. Yeah, that's the traditional saying. I'm familiar with this concept of the Native American tribes of North America. Okay, so yes, some traditional societies do have this future thinking view. It's certainly a part of Confucianism, so it does influence to some degree the view of in China culturally, and that does spill over. So, but some cultures tend to think more in the short term, which when you've got technology advancing at this rapid pace is a problem. So yeah, I wanted to yes, of course I can share this presentation with others. Oh, is it public? Well, we'll put it on the PLT website, and people can see it there. If they want to see it, they can come to our website. It's free. So yes, it can be shared with others. That's where it will be located. And there's more of it, and I might actually get. I have a friend who's here, I believe, who helps me with editing, and we might make a little bit better edited version of it that we can make more widely available. In its present form, I don't want to spread it too wide because it's a little bit too rough, in my view. But the content I found fascinating. Okay, you've got the link where you can see it, but that's not this. Oh, that's the link to the PLT page, right? But this video, this edit's not there yet. My conversation with Sohail, I've had several, many actually. This conversation went for almost 2 hours. So this is a very big subject. Maybe in the future, I'm sure that he will be willing to do at least one workshop for us sometime in the future. We'll want to bring a big audience. He's kind of a valuable resource, you could say. So I would like him to speak to a larger group. But yeah, speaking with him was very eye-opening. But questions about the future? I'm curious. If you don't have questions at this point, I have a question for you, which we're going to address in the breakout rooms, right? And so I'm going to impose that on you in a moment. This is something. Okay, we've got a question here. If developed countries with small populations didn't adapt to the evolution future, they should be the easiest countries to adapt. Yeah, that's true. How will undeveloped countries start with proud of this? There's not any example. Yeah, that's a fair question. And he actually gave a couple of examples, which they're not perfect examples, but they are what he called good governance. And he mentioned Norway and New Zealand. Now, they've both got problems. I'm well aware of them, but they have much better models. They have the advantage of wealth and control. You know, they've got a peaceful society, they've got a reasonably functional democracy, and they have a high standard of living and resources. Well, those two countries have done a reasonably good job of wealth distribution relative to global levels. They have certainly addressed poverty very successfully. They have much more advanced education systems and social cohesion, you could say, in terms of, you know, there aren't these, I mean, I know New Zealand actually had a youth suicide problem. So it's not paradise, but it's way closer to a reasonable, sustainable society than most societies. And, you know, there are others. So there are actually some examples which are partway there. And I think the question's great because, yeah, it's much easier to implement these sorts of long-term, just healthy, you know, survivable decisions in a country that has resources, in a country with a relatively small population or a small country. And some of the other countries that Sohail is working with include Malaysia and Singapore. Okay, we've got 10 minutes for breakout rooms. Oh, okay. All right, so we're going to jump to breakout rooms. Do you want to set those up for us, Lalita? And in your breakout room, I want you to ask, I want you to address a couple of questions. And, you know, you can be very free form, but I really want you to address this question. And that is, how important is it for us to think about the future? How is it relevant to my life? If I don't bother to try and prepare myself and my community for the future, how much does that matter? And if it does matter, in what areas do I need to look at? Is it the area of my own employability in the future, or maybe that's not a problem for me? If you're a student, what should I study? If you're part of a community, how is it going to affect our community? If it's your field, whether it's education or medicine, how is it going to affect my field? Okay, so the real question is, how might this be relevant to me? Where should I start learning more about future trends so that I have more control over what happens in my life and the life of the people that I'm interacting with? So that's your question. You have 10 minutes maximum. So I believe we're now going to do our waterfall. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to explain what this is. Most of you have done, well, if you've been in this before, you'll know what it is. If you're new, it's a lovely thing we can use to kind of connect through the internet. So I want you to all think of just a very short phrase. It could be 2 or 3 words, maybe 5, that you're going to type in the chat, but don't click the button to share it. So something to express what you got from this little workshop, this experience, something you feel was valuable to you. So you can put it in your own language if you like, because sometimes we have a couple of people who are doing some very quick Google Translate. And so just type in the chat, but don't click the share, what you got from today. And when I tell you to, we'll all share it at once. And it comes like this waterfall of ideas, and it feels great. So let's try that. So I got my little thing I want to share. Okay, now I'm going to give you another 20 seconds to write something, and then I'll tell you when to click the return so that we get all these wonderful inspirations together. Are you ready? So on the count of 3, 1, 2, and 3. Oh my God, we got lots of them. Wonderful. You've done this before, so I'm going to read them out for you. So, inspiring, good company and uniting intentions for proud. Great. Inspired and hopeful, helping hands, friends and community, most important. Planning a future for everyone and everything. Hope. That was last month. That was my one. The future is bright. This is good because I wanted people to come away feeling positive out of this, because when we started out, remember how grim and scary it was? But at the end, seems like we're feeling different. Beautiful, enlightening, and very interesting. A brighter picture of the world's economy and the future. Community for a better future. Need to imagine a bright future. That's critical. We start with imagining it. Fascinating. In Vietnamese, someone's translating that. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Dada, and everyone. Well, thanks to Sahil. He's happily asleep. So let's spare a thought for him. He really does amazing, wonderful work. Can I share my slides? Of course, I'm happy to change myself. Yeah, begins here. Thank you all for sharing that, and it's been a real pleasure. This is all new content for me, so it's sort of exciting, but I'm still figuring it out, but I'm learning a lot. So thank you for joining me in this little learning journey.
Thank you, Dada. Thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it. And please thank your guest and the interviewer. And thank you for all attending. And like Dada said, we will have this content available on our platform, which I believe Ishita can share once again in the chat in case you are not already a member. And we also have some of this footage available on our YouTube channel. But the best part about when you come to the community, you can interact. We can keep the conversation going. And I think that's what we're trying to inspire here, is not only just learning about this stuff, but actually turning this into knowledge and into action, and making this a better world, and all of us helping each other. So please, come join us on the community. And also on the community, we have a lot to offer. We have free planetary yoga in our live recordings. We also have other courses. We have planetary meditation on Saturdays. And next week on Sunday, I believe that we will have Amal Jacobson here talking about neo-humanism for our next planetary workshop. And we'll have more information about that by Monday or Tuesday. And we look forward to seeing you all here. And Ashita's putting all the information into the chat. And also we have a donations campaign. So please take a moment. You can donate through our towards our platform. There's a little button on the left-hand side on the main feed that you can click on, or you can go to the link that's in the chat and read all about PLP.
How do I save the transcription?
The transcription.
How to save it?
Does somebody know?
I believe you go to the live transcript and view transcript, and then there's a save transcript button. Takes a few steps. So look for live transcript at the bottom of the screen, on a computer at least. Then show it, and then there's a save transcript in that transcript window.
Okay, so do we have a poll today, Ishita or Lolita? Perfect,
Yes.
Thank you. And before we say goodbye, I also want to thank our translator and our host, Lolita, for being here. It's very late where she's at. And thank all of you. And of course, we couldn't do this without all of you all being here, and all the efforts of everybody that makes this all possible. So thank you. And enjoy the rest of your day or evening.
I think we're going to end with a little Kiirtan during the poll. Is that the plan?
That would be perfect, Dada. We'd really appreciate that.
Baba Nam Killa, 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 Baba Nam Killa. So I think we're closing now. Namaskar. Farewell. See you again soon.